Hello and welcome to another webinar with Debt Reduction Services, Inc. My name is Todd Christensen. I'm Director of Education at our nonprofit credit counseling agency and author of Everyday Money for Everyday People. I'll be the facilitator here today. I suggest that you have close by something to write on. You're going to be needing to write down 3 passcodes if you want to get credit for taking this webinar. The passcodes will be given throughout the presentation. And then you'll need those passcodes to take the quiz, which will be found at the same place where you found the link to this webinar. And the quiz also has 5 questions on it. So to begin with, let me just go ahead and introduce who we are, why we do what we do. Very briefly, Debt Reduction Services, Inc. has been around since 1996. We are a nonprofit credit counseling agency that helps people pay off their debts, consumer debts, dollar for dollar. Meaning, if you were to owe $5,000, you'd pay off $5,000. We just work with our clients to pay off their debts at better interest rates. We are financial educators. We do over 150 classes a year around the country, plus making these webinars available for free. And highly suggest that any friends or family members that you have that might be in need of such financial education, please feel free to refer them to this program. So we're talking about debt today. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with a kind of a self-evaluation quiz. I'm going to go through about 10 questions, and with some, they're all multiple choice. This is not the quiz that you have to take for credit, but this is just some questions that kind of spur the conversation here. So to begin with, which lender usually has the highest interest rate? And here are the 4 options. Is it a pawn shop, a title lender, a payday lender, or a tax refund loan? And as we look at this, as we go through this, of course, you can play along at home and score yourself. Just pause it if you want to give yourself some time to answer. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, though. So the answer is the payday lender, typically. So pawn loans usually carry APRs ranging from about 50% to 100%. Tax or title loans, which are loans against the title or ownership of a vehicle if you own it outright. Those typically can range in the 100 to 200% annual interest rate range. A tax refund anticipation lane, or what's called a RAL, can often range from as low as maybe 35% to well over 100%, since it's essentially a 2-week loan that if an organization is doing your taxes and they offer, and you're getting a refund, and they offer you to walk out with the bulk of your refund, it's essentially a 2-week loan, since that's about how long it takes to get your refund back. And if you multiply that 2-week loan times 26, the interest rate by 26, that's our 26 2-week periods in a year, the annual percentage rate can be well over 100%. Payday lenders typically 15 to 20%, some as high as 25% fee for, again, what's most often a 2-week loan, although it could be shorter, it could be longer. But annualized, that's really in the 400% to 500% range. I don't have it on here, but a rent-to-own, though not a lender, kind of found within or nearby the same type of an establishment. And prices of rent-to-own furniture or appliances or electronics typically are going to cost at least 100% more for the same item that you would find in a department store or a discount store. So moving on to the next screen, here's the first passcode that you're going to need. If you will please write this one down, PAY, P-A-Y, PAY, P-A-Y. Okay, question number 2. What is the average U.S. household credit card debt? Is it 6 to 8,000, 10 to 12, 14 to 16, 18 to 20? The answer is $14,000 to $16,000. Now, this is the average, and it kind of goes to show that you can kind of make statistics say whatever you want or give an impression for whatever you want. This is not the average for every American household. This is the average for U.S. households who have credit card debt. So this is not every household that has a credit card, since not all households with credit cards carry debt. This is for if you're in a household that carries debt from one month to the next, the average credit card debt for that type of household is in the $14,000 to $15,000 range. If you only include if you include all U.S. households, even those without credit card debt, then it's still in the $8,000 range. So the point being, we have a lot of credit card debt in our country, and those who carry a balance from one month to the next have almost twice as much as the average American household. Question number 3, what's the average student loan debt at graduation? Now, I hesitate to actually give this answer because it goes up every single year. I've been doing this since 2004, teaching classes, and back in 2004, since 2004, it's gone up about 80%. So the answer, what do you think? 10 to 15, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 25, 20 to 25, 25, 30. So here's the answer. I'm going to have to basically within the next year or two redo this whole webinar because currently it is almost 30,000, so about 29,000, and that's as of 2015. So it's been going up about $1,000 a year. The good news is that over the last just a year and a half, 2 years, the rate of increase is slowing down. Not quite $1,000 a year, but it's still going up more than inflation anyway. So problem with this is that it's long been considered, student loan debt has long been considered by many traditional financial experts to be good debt because over time, the amount of money the typical college graduate will earn versus the high school graduate will more than make up for that $30,000 or so of student loan debt. And which is true. The average lifetime earnings of a college graduate is nearly double the high school graduate. The high school graduate currently is projected to earn about $1.1 million over his or her lifetime versus about 2.1 for the average college graduate. But that's an average. Not all degrees are created equal when it comes to what to expect after college. And not all schools either. So if I were to get a degree that is only, on average, is only going to earn me $35,000 a year right after high school, right after college, I better not be getting into that much student loan debt versus somebody who might be in, for example, an engineering degree where they might be earning $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year out of college, or some sort of IT programming. That's not an unheard of amount, or it's not an unreasonable amount of student loan debt. So my point is, if you or somebody you know is going to college, make sure they have a realistic understanding of how much they're going to earn that first year out of college. The rule of thumb is don't borrow more than what you're going to earn your very first year out of college. Because if it's much more than that, you're going to have a hard time paying that off in the 10 years that you typically have on the standard student loan debt repayment plan. Now, I mentioned not all schools are created equal as well. on average, people going through proprietary schools or private schools versus the traditional university or community college, their debts can be much higher and certainly much more difficult to pay off. Their default rate is well over twice the default rate of students coming out of the traditional university. So people going into, anyone going into a proprietary school, highly recommend that they, one, commit to finish, because it doesn't matter if you finish or not, your degree, you still owe the money that you've borrowed. And two, that they have a really sound understanding that they've asked not just the school they're attending, but third party, they've done their research, they've gone to a library or gone online, looked at the reality of what the graduate from that program can expect to earn with the degree or with the certification. Question number 4. What's the final cost of a 30-year mortgage at 5% annual percentage rate, 5% APR? Is it 105% of the original all the way up to 200%? So let's say I bought a $100,000 home. There are still places in this country you can get a $100,000 home. After 30 years, I will have paid how much for that home? $105,000, including interest, $125,000, $150,000, or $200,000. The answer is, survey says, 200% of the original. 30 year. I mean, think about it. In that first year alone, most homeowners will have paid at that percentage rate will have paid about $5,000 just in interest on a $100,000 home. So most of the payments early on in a mortgage are going toward interest, with only $10, $20, $30, $40 maybe of that $700, $800 seemingly going toward the principal balance rather than. So most of it does go to interest. Now, that said, a lot of people will see that and say, well, I'm just going to rent if I'm going to end up paying twice as much. Well, the reality is, if you were to rent for that same 30-year period, you'll likely end up paying about the same amount in rent as you would in the balance, the principal and interest for a home. And then at the end of 30 years, the homeowner is sitting in a home that is worth $200,000 in this example, which they could sell and use it for some other purpose or another home or downsize or whatever they might be. But they own the home that they're in, versus the renter who now must continue to pay that same amount. And if they move out, there is no amount, they get no money back. So in general, owning a home is still considered a much better financial option than renting. There are exceptions, of course. If somebody is not financially stable enough to own a home, not a good idea. Renting does have its benefits as far as mobility and being able to move here and there. But long-term financially, we're talking home ownership is much better option. Which event hurts your credit score the most? And these all have to do with debt. And that's why we're talking about this during a debt presentation. Although this sounds like one that belongs in our credit webinar. But which of these hurts our credit the most? Is it bankruptcy, foreclosure, a short sale, or collections? I'll tell you the answer I get most often right after I give you the answer. The answer is bankruptcy. Most often when I go into classes, the answer most people will say is collections. They think collections hurts your credit the most. Not even close. A single collection account might hurt your credit score 5 or 10%, whereas a bankruptcy will usually cause the score to drop anywhere between 25 and 40%. The higher the score, the further the higher the score before the bankruptcy, the further the bankruptcy might cause the score to drop. But essentially, these go in order of impact on our score. Bankruptcy, number 1, foreclosure, again, 25, 30%. short sale about the same, very close to a foreclosure, and then the collections again down at the 5 to 10%. I think the reason, what I would guess, the reason why most people think that collections is going to be down there or up there with bankruptcy is that when you have one collection account, quite often you'll have 2 or 3, and maybe in the aggregate it can seem like it's equivalent to a bankruptcy on our credit rating. Question number 6: which lenders typically charge the highest interest rate? This sounds like one of the first question, but these are different types of lenders. These are you've got a tire store lenders, credit card, the major credit card companies, gas cards, or mortgage lenders. The answer is tire stores typically. And to think about this, the reason this question comes up is we have to understand that our interest rate is usually tied to the risk that the lender is taking in lending money to us. Mortgage lenders have usually the lowest interest rate. That's because they lend their money that is, and it's going to be tied or secured by the asset for which they're lending, the actual home. If they had to, if the borrower skipped out when it went into foreclosure, the mortgage company now owns that home, and they can turn around and sell it, typically for much less than what is owed on it. So they're still going to lose money, but typically not going to lose the whole amount of the loan. So mortgage lenders are going to be on the low end because they're taking the least amount of risk. Tire stores are typically taking a risk, not because, I mean, some of them will actually secure their loan against the tires, and they can go and repossess the tires. But because they're much more likely to lend money to consumers with poor credit ratings. So this is one of the easier places to start building credit, is actually at a tire and brake store, because they do lend to, I'm not going to say all customers who come in, but much more likely to lend to consumers with challenged credit than a major credit card. Gas cards would come in a close second. Gas cards, retail store cards, and so the tire stores you usually find in the 20 to 30% range as far as interest rates. Gas cards, retail store cards in the 15 to 25% range, and the major credit card, the average credit card interest rate for a card in good standing is in that 15% range, but might be in the upper single digits in the 9%, 8-9% range. Mortgage lenders, they are varying by year. Currently in 2015, they are in the 4 to 5% range. As things improve, hopefully, going into the future, we're hoping to see the economy improve, but that also means that mortgage rates will typically go up. Okay, passcode number 2, down, D-O-W-N, down. Write that down, please. Number 3, or question number 7, why do most individuals file for bankruptcy? This is based upon surveys that we've done with individuals going through bankruptcy and needing to come to one of our bankruptcy classes. The 2005 bankruptcy law that updated the bankruptcy rules and requires people going through bankruptcy, 1, before they even file, to go see a nonprofit credit counseling agency to talk about their options and to understand their budget and so forth. And 2, after they file, but before the court finally discharges them of their responsibility to pay off those debts, it requires them to take a 2-hour debtor education course. And during that course, over the last 10 years, so we've surveyed a couple thousand individuals and asked them, what was the reason? What do you identify as the reason for filing for bankruptcy? And these are 4 of the top reasons that they cite. Which one is the main reason, the top reason? And the other 3, I could pretty much say barely add up to the number 1 reason. So the number 1 reason is it medical expenses, poor money management, divorce, or job loss. The answer is job loss. At the depths of the recession, it was over 50% of bankruptcies were being attributed to job loss. But generally, it's in about the 40% range, 35, 40% range. The next one on this list is poor money management, which is pretty much held steady in good times and bad times at about 25%. 1 in 4 bankruptcies. The filers are saying it was just because they made poor financial choices, typically overspending, not budgeting, and getting into credit card debt, credit card trouble. Third on the list, although this is the one we'll hear about most on the news, because it's kind of one of those stories that just sounds more sensational and kind of fraught with a lot of fear that this could happen to anybody. But it's third by a pretty distant third, at about 17 to 18% is the medical expenses. And I think the reason why this can be so concerning, obviously, is we don't know when we're going to have some major medical issue. And while I'm talking about bankruptcy and medical expenses, be aware that there is no such thing in the courts as a medical bankruptcy. There are personal bankruptcies. The most common one by far is a Chapter 7 or liquidation bankruptcy, and then followed by Chapter 13, which is a repayment or wage earners bankruptcy, where you actually pay back a small percentage of those debts that you owe over the next 3, 4, 5 years. Medical expenses can be included in either of those. If you ever consider bankruptcy, highly recommend you talk to a bankruptcy attorney. If there's any complexity, you can file for bankruptcy on your own. I like what an attorney once told me about filing for bankruptcy on your own. He compared it to taking your own appendix out. Yes, you can remove your own appendix and save your life, but there's probably going to be some major long-lasting negative consequences down the road. You can file for bankruptcy on your own. Not always the best idea. There can be some major financial problems that you might fail to address on your own. So highly recommend considering a bankruptcy attorney. And even though they do charge fees, most of them will help you figure out how to make those payments either before or after you file. And then the last of the 4 is divorce in the 7 to 10% range, depending on the year. This, for those who've gone through divorce, are wondering why that's not number 1, and those who haven't gone through divorce are wondering why that's even up there. It's quite common for people who go through divorce. If one of the ex-spouses files for bankruptcy, the other one is often close behind, because in many states, especially common property states, which are typically many of the states found in the western United States, if both spouses have their name on a joint account, even though the divorce decree may specify that one spouse is responsible for this debt and the other spouse is responsible for that debt, if either spouse chooses to stop paying, yes, they're in contempt of court. The court cannot, we don't divorce the creditor. The court can't force the creditor to accept the decree. They're not party to the divorce. So, if one spouse, ex-spouse, stops paying, that creditor then can go after the other spouse if their name was on the account, or if they lived in a common property state and that debt was incurred during the marriage. And so, quite often, we'll have people come into our offices who are filing for who have been divorced for 6, 12 months or so, and tell us the story that they've been, getting back on their feet financially, and that things were just turning around, and they all of a sudden started getting collection notices for the debt that their ex-spouse was supposed to be paying, and there's no way that they can take care of these now, and quite often they end up having to go to bankruptcy. So if you or somebody you care about is going through bankruptcy, do all that you can to get your names off of the accounts during or right after the bankruptcy happens. Talk to the creditor directly. Many creditors can work with you. Some will say, hey, send us your divorce decree and we'll get that figured out. Others don't. They're not required to. They made the loan. They issued the loan based on 2 incomes, 2 individuals to pay off the debts. That's the risk, the way they lowered their risk. And taking one of those individuals off is going to increase their risk of loss. So some just won't do it. And unfortunately, that's kind of the reality we live in. Question number 8, how much do minimum payments pay down credit card debts? We're talking specifically credit card debts. Are we talking if you make your minimum payment, it's going to pay down 1 to 2%, 4 to 6, 8 to 10, 12 to 15? The answer, I wish, were 12 to 15 or more, but the reality is that you make a minimum payment, it's typically only going to be paying 1% of the balance. Might be a little more, but this is why making only minimum payments on a credit card that you don't even use anymore, even if it's only a $3,000 or $5,000 balance, could take 25 years to pay off. We always recommend, I recommend paying off the entire balance every single month. And for those who scoff at that, I'm sorry, but there are 1/3 of all credit card holders do that every month. Don't say that's impossible. We have to understand that we have to pay off our debts. The faster we pay them off, the less interest we pay. If you're in a situation where you're having trouble making those minimum payments, or you're not making progress on it, well, then go see a nonprofit credit counseling agency. They're there to help. There are fees. Be aware that there are fees even with nonprofit agencies, but they help their clients pay off their debts within 3 to 5 years rather than 20 years. So, but roughly 1/3 of credit card holders pay off their debts, their balance every single month. Another 1/3 carries a balance but pays more than the minimum, and then there's another, the remaining third pretty much makes only the minimum payments or less, and in default every single month. So 1/3 are in real bad shape, 1/3 that are not so good shape, and then 1/3 that are using their credit cards wisely. All right, question number 9. Who helps consumers pay their debts dollar for dollar? Okay, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here. The answer is not state lotteries. Bankruptcy attorneys help clients either get out of their debts dollar for dollar or reduce it to a very small amount. Debt negotiators try and get their clients to only have to pay half of what they owe, but then they are going to charge their own fees, and the debtors may end up having to pay taxes on whatever was forgiven by the creditor, so that ends up typically in the 75 to 85% range rather than 50% of what they actually pay back. So the answer is credit counseling agencies. And if you're looking for a credit counseling agency you can trust, I typically suggest looking at one of the industry trade groups. There are 3 major trade groups. One is ACPROS, ACCPROS. It's the Association of Credit Counseling Professionals, acpros.org. The next one is FCAA, Financial Counseling Association of America, FCAA.org. And the last one is the NFCC, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, nfcc.org. Question number 10. Which age group accounts for most bankruptcies in this country? Is it the youngest cohort there, the 20 to 25-year-olds, the 36 to 40-year-olds, 46 to 50, 71 or older? And most classes when I ask this will typically get this one right. It is that 46 to 50-year-old age group. Not just by a few percentage points over the 36 to 40% range, so 40-year-old range, and that's not much higher than so the 46 to 50-year-old group accounts for about 13% of bankruptcies. The 36 to 40-year-old group accounts for 1 in 10, followed very closely by the 71 and older group, which is 9.4%, almost 1 in 10. The 20 to 25 is only 5%, so 1 in 20, but that's growing pretty quickly. And if you think about it, that's really heartbreaking. You got somebody just starting off their professional career, starting off their career, adult lives, and they are saddled with bankruptcy for the rest of their lives, meaning anytime an employer down the road, even if it's after the 10 years that a bankruptcy stays on our credit report, if a potential employer says, have you ever filed for bankruptcy, they still have to legally respond, yes. That doesn't come off public records. It only comes off the credit report after 10 years. And because we're having so much fun, we're going to have a bonus question here. What percentage of bankruptcy filers have filed before? So this is their second, third, or fourth, or more filing. Is it 10 to 20%, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50? And the answer is it's right about 20 to 22% of filers have already filed once before. And I used to assume that that was those who are filing for the second time were likely to be medical related bankruptcies where they had some chronic expenses. Having gone in and looked at hundreds of bankruptcies and looked at what their debts are and where they're coming, what their causes are, and who the debts were with. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily support that hypothesis. It's equally medical and just overspending on consumer goods. So, but there is a large percentage of people who are filing a second time, and for those who are filing a third time, it's much smaller. It's about 1 in 50 bankruptcies is somebody who's filing a third time. And of course, it goes down from there for people. And there are people who have filed 4 and 5 times. You can file. Current law allows Chapter 7 to be filed every 8 years. Chapter 13, people can file another Chapter 13 as soon as they pay off their previous Chapter 13. But that is borderline legal advice. I would suggest that you talk to an attorney if you filed for bankruptcy in the last decade and are considering it again. Okay, so a few more things, a few more screens to finish up here today. When we're talking about paying off debts, so that's the goal here. We've gone through some of the information, FAQs and some trivia about debts. But what is the goal is let's figure out a way to pay off your own debts on your own if you can. You can pick the analogy that you like best. Debt can be, the monkey on your back. It can be a ball and chain. It can be prison or financial enslavement, living in a house of cards, whatever it might be. The reality is, it feels confining because it is. It's financially restrictive to us in most cases. There are some debts that can help us build a better financial future. As I mentioned, traditionally those are considered things like a home loan or a student loan or maybe even a business loan, although each of those carry their own risks. We're going to be talking about how to pay off debts and do it if we can do it on our own, first of all, and then what some of the ideas for turning to third parties. Who are those that help, and who are those who are going to actually hurt our finances to be careful of. All right, so numbers of the day: 5,047, according to a study done by creditcards.com. 5,047 was the average credit card debt for those individuals who have a credit card. Now, didn't I just say it was about 14,000 and then about 8,000 for every household? That's the difference between an individual and a household. Again, 5,000 is per individual versus household. And then $8,220, that's the average credit card debt for those who carry a balance from 1 month to the next. So if you have a household of 2, it can very easily get up into that mid, $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 range. So how do you pay off debts? What's the best way to pay off your debt? Now, if you are a CPA, or if you have this kind of CPA mindset mentality, you know that paying off your debts in order of interest rates, the highest interest rate, anything you can pay off, pay toward the highest interest rate account, you're going to save money over time. That is true. We will pay less interest over time if we focus on the highest interest rate first. We're going to get into why, though, for most of us that may not be the best answer, and what the other options are. For now, here's your third passcode. Even though I'm giving it out now, please don't stop and turn this webinar off. Keep going. There's still a lot of good information we're going to be addressing here shortly. Now, N-O-W is the passcode, now. All right, so not all of us, as I mentioned, are CPA types, and we don't get, that to get out of debt, using the highest interest rate method typically takes a little more discipline. It can take a couple of years, 3-4 years even, before we can get rid of a debt on that program. And so it takes a lot of discipline, and not most of us get into debt because of discipline. Because we're disciplined, it's usually quite often the other way around. So most of us want to be able to know that we're able to pay off our debt someday and that we're seeing progress. And the sooner we can see that progress, the better. So here's kind of like shooting hoops here. Anytime you have, these hoops are the different debts that we might have. And quite often we approach our debt repayment kind of in this fashion. We just throw it to whichever one we feel like hitting this month. I want to pay a little extra this debt or that debt. But we need to be organizing our attack on our debts. And so what we do is we take those debts and we organize them. Here's the suggestion for a lot of people, and I would actually suggest most people. Organize them from smallest debt to largest. And then while paying the minimum payment on all the other debts, send all your extra available money that you can use toward debt repayment to the smallest debt first. Let me give you an example. If maybe you had a clothing store, an account at a clothing store at the mall that has this $150 debt that's been hanging around for a couple of years. They're only asking for $15 a month, and 15 out of that 15, 14, 13 of it goes toward interest. And so it's coming down very slowly. It's still going to take 3 or 4 or 5 years to pay off. On the highest interest rate first, that one we may not pay that one off for 3, 4, or 5 years. But if we had an extra $50 a month and we're sending that to the smallest debt, and that one was the smallest debt, we'd be able to get rid of that one in just in about 3 months or less, and be able to move on to the next one on our list. And all of a sudden, even though over time we're going to pay a little more in interest, it's really not significant for most households. It's not a significant amount more that we would pay in interest by doing it this way versus the highest interest rate. But if we turn to we pay off one, we turn to the next one, all of a sudden we can say, hey, I got rid of one, now I only have, in this case, 3 more to go. And maybe we can pay that one off in the next 5, 6, 7 months. And then we move on to the next larger one. But we're making progress, and that's really key, is that we're able to feel like we're continuing to progress, and we'll stay motivated to actually get it paid off. Okay, so if you'll go back to, you can pause this now if you want to, but go back to where you found the link to this webinar. And along with the quiz that's there should be a link to our handouts. In that handout should be a downloadable PDF. In that handout, you'll find a debt elimination worksheet and a Power Cash worksheet. A Power Cash is this. This is a way to find available money that you didn't know was available in your household budget that you could use to pay down debts, accelerate the repayment. Excuse me. So this, for example, it's a lot of people say, well, just take 10% of what you earn and throw that out, or 5% and throw that towards your debt repayment. The problem is we can't do that with all of our other expenses. You can't say, well, I'm only going to send 95% of my mortgage this month or rent this month, and I'm only going to send 90% of my car payment or my utility bill. That's not acceptable for many bills. So what we suggest, and we call this power cash, is you look at your discretionary expenses, things that we have control somehow over how much we're spending on those. And these would include things like groceries, entertainment, travel, dining out, things that we do every month, but we can control how much we spend on groceries. We can control how much we're going out to eat or what we're doing for entertainment. And then take 10%, figure out how much we spend on those items every month. Take 10% of those and take that 10% out at the beginning of the month or as soon as we get paid and send that off to our the first one on our debt elimination worksheet. That's how we're going to accelerate debt repayment. And for most households, let's say you're a household of 4, and you're spending $500 or $600, let's say $600 on groceries every single month. By the way, currently the average grocery expense per person, man, woman, and child in this country is about $150 a month. So a household of 4, on average, could be spending $600. It's with a little organization, and you can get that down much lower than that. So 100. Let's say they went from $600 a month. They took out $60 after payday and sent that off to their first creditor on their debt elimination worksheet. That would leave them with $540 in groceries, which is not undoable. It's possible. We all know, if anybody who's done grocery shopping, you can find ways here and there to minimize what we spend on groceries, either by buying a little more make-at-home type foods or looking for certain sales and stocking up on sale items over time. So anyway, if you want to now or later, take a moment and work on those 2 worksheets in the handouts. Okay. Now, what do I mean here by keep going? Each time, here's the thing. Once you pay off a debt, add that monthly payment that you were sending off to that previous creditor. Add that monthly payment and your power cash to the next debt on your list. And so you're just attacking one debt after another, and each time you pay off a debt, the payment to your next one on your list gets bigger and bigger and pays off faster and faster. Okay, so let's talk about now third-party debt repayment options. There's really 3 to consider. I don't include on here true debt consolidation loans. A lot of people here will ask us about getting a debt consolidation loan. That's where you take all your debts and you get a new loan from some lender who's somehow willing to pay off all your other debts and give you a new loan. Now you only have one loan to pay. Rarely, it's hard to do, mostly because most lenders, if you're having trouble paying off all your current debts, they already know you're a pretty high risk. And so they're either not going to be willing to give you a loan to pay off all their debts, or if they do, it's going to be a pretty high interest rate. So I typically don't include that as one of these options. Here are the 3 options to go over. Credit counseling, or what's called debt management programs that credit counseling agencies offer. As I mentioned, this is the highest, they lower their interest rates, try and get any fees to be waived, any late fees or over limit fees, get back on track. Quite often, clients will have their accounts re-aged so that they're no longer reported as late on their credit, and at the end of their 3 to 5 years and they can't go past 5 years in these programs. At the end of that program, their credit is quite often very good, since they have 3 to 5 years of on-time payments, 0 debt, and are typically good to go. So not everybody finishes a debt management program. It is in the 30 to 40% range typically for the industry. We wish it were higher, but there are some people that can get through it. But there's a lot of people who start maybe a little too optimistic of their situation and end up having to leave the program. But it's typically the first place to start. Obviously I work for a credit counseling agency. Take that, I guess, with a grain of salt. But it does say something that the Bankruptcy Act of 2005 requires potential bankruptcy filers to go see a credit counselor first before they can file. So even somebody who's considering bankruptcy, they need to start with a credit counselor anyway. The second one on the list, debt settlement or debt negotiators, they're called. What they do is typically tell their clients, look, stop making payments to your creditors. Start sending us those payments. In fact, send a letter to your creditors telling them not to contact you anymore. That is a pretty scary thing when you start getting into that sort of thing. Basically, when a creditor gets such a letter or notification, by law, by the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, they can no longer call or try and collect on that debt. They're except for through courts to notify us that we're being sued in court. At which time, if they win, and they would likely win because if it's a valid debt, they're going to win. Then they can garnish our wages and cause trouble with our finances. So it's really dicey to go that direction. The success rate for the industry is in the single digits typically. Quite often, somebody who goes this direction will be sued and have their wages garnished. So, and even though they'll say right up front that they'll dangle the carrot in front of potential clients, saying, look, we have all this success, all these people who we've helped, they only had to pay off half of what they owed. The problem is that does not include the debt settlement company's fees, nor does it include the taxes. Quite often people have to pay. So even successful clients are still going to pay typically about 75 to 90%, 85, 90% of the original debt. And even though most clients considering debt settlement already are in really bad financial shape, credit-wise as well, it does definitely have a long-term impact on credit. Let me go back here to a credit counseling. We get a lot of questions about how it impacts credit. FICO, if you go to myfico.com, they're the pioneers in credit rating, credit scoring. They do indicate that since 1999, they have not taken credit counseling into account when determining credit scores. Now that's direct. There's no direct impact on our credit report, our credit score. There can be an indirect impact by closing accounts, because accounts do close for further usage. Closing accounts can have an initial negative impact. Over time, typically what happens, though, is that score rebounds as clients get caught up on their payments and make those payments for long term. So that's debt management and debt settlement. So bankruptcy. What is bankruptcy? Bankruptcy is a legal action taken in federal court to protect our assets, and those assets can include not just a home or a vehicle, but also our income. So even if somebody's had their wages garnished, there's still some protection, ability to stop that through bankruptcy. And this is where we suggest that people considering bankruptcy go see a bankruptcy attorney. They can come see a nonprofit credit counseling agency first. If it's not something that's going to work with such an organization, we quite often refer to bankruptcy anyway. As I mentioned, there's Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. If you've heard of Chapter 9 or Chapter 11, typically those are business bankruptcies as well. Yeah, if you file on your own without an attorney, you might save yourself anywhere from $500 to $5,000 or more initially. But over time, like I said, you might be doing you're probably doing yourself a disservice. There are a lot of attorneys that will work with a document prep place. They typically don't give legal advice, though. They're just checking to make sure that the paperwork is done properly. So let's see some of the drawbacks to bankruptcy. Of course, there's the dramatic drop in your credit score, and for the next few years, it's going to be virtually impossible to buy a home or not to buy a car. But then again, it's a drawback. Many people who file for bankruptcy know that they almost the day after they file for bankruptcy, they start getting invitations to come down to some used car lot where they're going to finance them and help them start to, quote, rebuild, unquote, their credit. What those invitations don't say is that quite often those interest rates are in the 20, 30, even 40% range, and the cars are such junkers that they typically don't even outlast the loan. So be very careful about doing such things when you're filing for, or having filed for bankruptcy. There are some things, though, that can't be included in bankruptcy, typically are not included in bankruptcy. Student loans, about 97, 98% of student loans survive bankruptcy. So you have to be able to prove that not only can you not make your payments now, but essentially you'll never be able to meet that obligation in the future. So essentially that is long-term significant disability, that you'll never have income to meet your student loan obligation. Other things hard or impossible to get rid of: child support, alimony, certain taxes, recently incurred debts. Obviously, it sounds wrong to say for somebody to say, "Well, I'm going to go on a trip to Europe and put it on the credit card and come back and file for bankruptcy." Yeah, it is wrong. It is wrong too, because the court and trustee that's working on that is going to see that, and they're not going to include that in your bankruptcy. So that's bankruptcy. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't buy a home after filing. I've run into people who have, within just 2 years after filing for bankruptcy, and they've come to one of my classes. 2 years later, I've run into them in the community, and they've talked about how they've been able to rebuild their credit and get into a home at a pretty decent interest rate. So there are ways to rebuild your credit. So before we finish up here, I'll refer you back again to the handouts. Take a look at some of the materials in there. There is like I mentioned, worksheet for paying off your debts on your own, and some information on what credit counseling, debt settlement, and bankruptcy are. Highly recommend at this point, if you're looking for help with debt and you're having a hard time doing it on your own, do find a financial professional. Find someone you trust. If you don't have a nonprofit credit counseling agency close by, or you're not comfortable talking to them on the phone, typically there are nonprofits in your community that have may have a financial counseling component to them. Start there, and they can direct you to a service that you can rely on. So at this time, as we finish up, I again suggest that you consider taking some of our other Everyday Money workshops available online 24/7. If you have any questions ever or would like some more information about your personal financial situation, feel free to give us a call. Our website is down there on the bottom, debtreductionservices.org. Toll free, you can call us 877-688-3328. Again, it's 877-688-3328, and we're happy to help. Wish you all the best, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.